Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour uh, for the 16th year of Chungi, the 7th month and the 6th day with the heavenly calendar. Tamil was sitting in for the second king of Chunuk Yongji Moon. And as you might guess, I am back home. I'm back home. I was in Japan for a week or so for the 7178 festivities at Chol. And then also after that, I went down to the Osaka area to see my father. He is 98 years old. He'll be 99 in December. He first went to Japan as a missionary in 1948. And so he has been there a long time, before I was born, which stands to reason since I was born in Japan. And, you know, I think Father has said somewhere that as people grow older, they sort of revert. Is that the right word? Anyway, go back to being infants. Yeah, infants. And my father's not at that stage, but he is certainly more and more dependent on help. He really needs. He requires 24-hour help. And fortunately, he's in a situation where he has 24-hour help. But also it was, I think, important for me as his oldest son to be there from time to time. And since I was in Japan for a public mission, I thought it would be a good idea for me to also serve a private purpose to go down there and see him, which I did. I was able to spend a couple of days with him. Yeah. All right. Yeah, we're all going to be that way someday. All right. So, okay. All right, let's see. Let's take our tour around the kingdom. Sorry if I'm a little bit, I don't know, off. I'm in desperate need of a shower right now. I walked in the house and my wife tells me, "Oh, you smell," but I don't have time to take a shower now. I have to wait until after the King's Report. Fortunately, smell does not communicate through the internet. Won't that be the day? For some reason, no one's working on that. Probably a good reason. There are a lot of bad smells in this world. All right. Let's see here. At the Chongpyeong, Tennessee, it is currently 52 degrees and partly cloudy. Getting up to 78 today. Nice with times of sun and clouds. 78 for a high tonight. Partly cloudy and cool. Low of 50. And in father's hometown of Cheongju, North Pyongan Province, in what is today North Korea, it is currently 79 degrees and rain, getting down to 71 tonight. Tomorrow, partly sunny and uncomfortably humid, high of 84. At the Cheonryung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, currently 47 and sunny. Whoa, chilly morning. 47 and sunny. Pleasant with intervals of clouds and sun, high of 76 tonight, becoming cloudy with a couple of showers towards dawn, low of 54 tonight. And then in Limestone County, Texas, Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground, currently 73, mostly clear, getting up to 97 today, very warm with sunshine and a few clouds, low of 75 tonight. I mean, not tonight, tomorrow night, humid with increasing, or I guess tonight, right? Yeah, tonight, yeah, or tonight into tomorrow morning. Humid with increasing cloudiness, a thunderstorm in spots late. And then at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, currently 80 degrees and clear, low of 75 tonight. Tomorrow, hot, humid, partial sunshine, danger of dehydration, high of 95. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 84 and mostly cloudy right now and getting down to 72 tonight. I shower in spots this evening, otherwise overcast. 92 for a high tomorrow, hot. Times of sun, clouds and sun, possible danger of dehydration. And at the Ilan property in Taiwan, currently 88 degrees and clear. Tonight, mainly clear, 76 for a low. Tomorrow, 92 for a high, sunshine and a few clouds. All right, quick trip around the kingdom. Let's go to Father's words. And I'm home now, so I could use the Chun Sung Gyo, but why don't we just stay with the world scripture? And Father here speaking on November 19th, 1984 says, freedom is definitely the most precious, or one of the most precious presents that we have received from the Creator. Human beings were created as beings who have a free 자유로운 정신적, a free psychology, I guess is the literal translation, but a free spirit, I guess, or yeah, free spirit is. It's interesting that Father is so positive about freedom because actually in Asia, in East Asia, freedom kind of had a negative connotation. Not surprising, since East Asia has been ruled by despots and tyrants and kings who had little use for freedom except their own. And it really is I think the influence of Christianity, particularly Protestant Christianity, sorry, Catholics, but I think the influence of Protestant Christianity that has caused the people of Asia, East Asia, to look at freedom in a much more positive light. And I'm really glad to see that Father is presenting freedom in a positive light, right? That we have this innate freedom. And Father even goes beyond Christianity, because he says that, hey, listen, freedom did not cause the fall. Yeah, look it up. Look it up in the Divine Principle. There's a little subsection there called Freedom and the Fall. In Father's teaching, a person who is completely free, in other words, free of sin, free of Satan's influence, a person who is completely free, truly free, will always tend toward God, tend toward goodness. But right now we are slaves to sin, right? Human beings are born with slaves to sin. And so we make choices, but are those choices truly free choices? Are we free to make the right choice? Because we are under so much influence from society around us, for example, and this is something that sadly happens from time to time. When a second generation or a person born as a second generation chooses to experiment with sex, right? And decides to just sort of have sex one day just to see what it feels like. Is that person exercising freedom? Right? I would say not. Well, they're exercising a choice, that is true. But they are acting under the influence of society, of their peers, especially if they're in the public schools. But Father has a very positive view of freedom. Of course, Father says that, hey, you know what? But we cannot have freedom without responsibility, cannot have freedom without accomplishments, without results, without accomplishments, right? And also he says that there is no freedom outside of the principle. And that's a point that I think, myself included, but many people have trouble with when they first hear the principle, right? I thought you said we're free, but you say that there are walls. You're only free if you're inside of these walls. But what that means, though, is that the principle is not some artificial dogma that Father made up. All right, it is the user's guide. Okay, we are free to put diesel fuel in a car that takes gasoline. Right? But from the perspective, but that is an unprincipled choice, right? That is an unprincipled choice in the sense that it goes against the the user guide, right? The user guide clearly says that this car can only take gasoline, but are you then free when you put diesel in there instead of gasoline? No, I don't think so. There is no freedom once you throw away the user's guide and decide to start doing whatever you want. Uh, so I think it takes us a little bit of time to wrap our heads around that. But when you think about it, it is truly it is truly the case. Because if we are acting outside of the principle, then we are going against our own interests, and we are making ourselves less free, because we are becoming more distant from God, and we are actually, well, we are either harming our physical health or our spiritual health or something like that. Okay. Alrighty then. So yes, freedom, yes. I tried to research one time, when did the word freedom come into the East Asian languages, Japanese, Korean, and Chinese? As I mentioned before, a lot of Western concepts came into Japanese, Korean, and Chinese during the latter half of the 19th century and kind of into the 20th century as well, when sort of there was a huge East meets West type of a situation. And so people in the East, let's say that Japan, Korea, China, were creating a lot of words. A lot of words were created, especially in Japan. I saw one Chinese linguist on a YouTube sort of lamenting that so much of Chinese today actually comes from Japanese, because the Japanese made up all these words in the 19th century, and China has pretty much imported most of them lock, stock, and barrel. Anyway, so it's an interesting topic to pursue someday. Perhaps someone would like to write a thesis on that. Anyway, so let's just see what is going on. Now, I've chosen this article today. It's an opinion article. 5 reasons why Putin will never end the war in Ukraine. We want the war to end. In fact, the war has to end. Right? And at least, if it doesn't end, the United States has to end its participation in that war. This is what I've been saying. Right? That President Trump at some point may have to make a very difficult choice to just tell the people of Ukraine, tell Zelensky, hey, you know what? I tried, but I've got bigger fish to fry, and I'll come back to you. I promise. But we're going to have to leave you right now and go deal with China and North Korea and the South China Sea, because we got so much going on there. And that's actually, from a world perspective, that's actually more important. Actually, America's role is larger, because at least with Ukraine, you have the Europeans, right? You have the Europeans, and they're going to have to take up the slack, I think, if the United States decides to dramatically scale down. Never say pull out, okay? They'll never say pull out, but dramatically scale down its involvement in the Ukraine situation. But anyway, let's look at this opinion by this guy, Alexander J. Motyl. He's an opinion contributor. Let's look at his credentials first. He's a professor of political science at Rutgers, a specialist on Ukraine, Russia, and the USSR, and on nationalism, revolutions, empires, and theory. He is the author of 10 books of nonfiction, as well as Imperial Ends, The Decay, Collapse, and Revival of Empires, and Why Empires Re-Emerge, Imperial Collapse and Imperial Revival and Comparative Perspective. All right, yeah, so he sounds like he spends a lot of time on this kind of thing. So let's take a look at what he says. Let me bring this up larger for you to see. Okay. If President Trump ends the Russo-Ukrainian war with a durable peace, then he will certainly deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. But the key word is durable. For an accord to last longer than it takes the ink on the document to dry, it has to be acceptable to and accepted by both sides. Mutual acceptability implies some degree of equally distributed gains and losses. Anything else would be perceived by one of the sides as unfair and unjust, likely dooming the accord. The equal distribution of gains and losses favors the aggressor. In principle, aggression should not be rewarded by any gains. It should be punished with losses, whether in the form of reparations or loss of acquired territory. At this point, the reality of power clashes with principle, and it may prove impossible to punish the aggressor to the deserved degree. Compromise may be unavoidable, even if unacceptable to the victim. I think so far I agree with him. There are thus two legitimate and durable ways for the Russo-Ukrainian war to end. Russia and Ukraine could agree to a deal that falls short of each of their desired ends, or Russia could have the epiphany and willingly abandon its imperialist war. In the first instance, both sides will be unhappy, but equally so. That might deter them from seeking revenge or otherwise aggravating their relations. Given Russia's current rejection of any compromise that falls short of its maximalist demand for Ukraine's destruction, it could agree to such a deal only if forced by a joint coercive effort by Ukraine, the US, and Europe. And yeah, this doesn't look like it's going to happen very soon, okay? In the second instance, Trump would encourage Vladimir Putin to hightail it to Pyongyang and then support whichever more or less rational Russian leader succeeds him. Obviously, Putin won't oblige Trump, which means that Trump would have no alternative to forcing Putin to see the light by arming the Ukrainians and enabling them to reverse Russian territorial advances. Well, okay, I'm not an expert, and I have not written a single book on Ukraine or on Russia or on the USSR. But I don't know why my idea is such a bad one, right? What is my idea? My idea is to put pressure on China and get China to call Putin and say, "Hey, whoa, we got to, America's breathing down our neck. Trump is breathing down on my neck here, and it's getting too hot for me. You got to stop. You got to stop, or we cannot help you anymore," or something like that. Because, and I suspect this man would agree with me that Russia has become pretty much of a junior partner and a very small junior partner in the Russo-Chinese relationship. In fact, it's not even Russo-Chinese anymore. It's Chinese-Russo relationship. That Russia is really dependent on China in many ways. And I understand that the United States does not want to give China the opportunity to sort of take credit for ending the war. But if it's done in a way where China is forced to do it by Trump, then then China is not really taking credit. Trump is taking credit because he has forced China to make that call to Putin and telling Putin to stop the war. And well, I don't know. If I'm the only one talking about this, maybe it's not such a good idea, but I don't know why. Okay. So anyway, in both scenarios, Russia can be brought to the negotiating table only by force. On his own, Putin will not and cannot opt for peace. So actually, he talks about here Russia having an epiphany. And I guess my idea would be that China would cause this epiphany, right? Or Russia could have an epiphany and willingly abandon its imperialist war. And I just wonder if maybe he dismisses this, but I wonder if China could play a part in actually bringing about this kind of epiphany. Anyway, we'll see. In the first instance, both sides would be unhappy, but equally so. That might deter them from seeking revenge. Well, we did that already. Okay. In the second instance, Trump would encourage Vladimir Putin to hightail it to Pyongyang. We did that too recently. In other words, to seek political asylum in North Korea, and then support whichever more or less rational Russian leader succeeds him. But I think Putin knows that if he's going to seek political asylum, North Korea is probably not the place. Definitely not the place. I don't know of any country leader that sought political asylum in North Korea. All right. China, maybe. Why not China? Why China, maybe. Of course, he would want to choose a country where the regime is stable enough to last at least through the rest of his lifetime. Where would that be? Where would that be? The Nazis all went to Argentina, didn't they? Maybe Putin go to, I don't know, Brazil, Venezuela, maybe. Venezuela seems to be doing okay. Anyway, so obviously Putin won't oblige Trump, which means that Trump would have no alternative to forcing Putin to see the light by arming the Ukrainians and enabling the reverse Russian territory advances. So Putin won't oblige Trump, he says, again, leaving China out of the equation. In both scenarios, Russia can be brought to the negotiating table only by force. On his own, Putin will not and cannot opt for peace, the fact that neither Trump nor his key advisor, Steve Witkoff, appears to appreciate. But understanding that Putin has no interest whatsoever in a durable peace is the first and most important step on the road to peace. All right, let's see what he has to say. As Thomas Friedman of the New York Times puts it, oh, yeah, we don't like this guy. Anyway, Putin is a bad guy, a cold-blooded murderer. He is not the friend of the president. That is a fantasy that Trump chooses to believe is real. But being a cold-blooded murderer is only half of the problem. That is not why Putin doesn't want peace. The reasons for that are many. First, Putin truly believes that the Ukrainian state must be destroyed in order for Russia to survive. That's absurd, of course, but it's also the intractable reality. Exterminating Ukrainians as a distinct people is an imperative for Putin. No compromise is possible. All right, well, okay. Is this true? Second, Putin has wholly identified himself with the war. It's his. As a result, his political and possibly physical survival depends on the war's outcome. And given that the war has killed or wounded over 1 million Russians and ruined what was once an economy with great potential, nothing short of a smashing victory will do. Third, Putin knows that if and when the war ends, several 100,000 demobilized soldiers, angry, aggressive, and armed, will descend like locusts on Russian society and increase its already high level of criminality. Putin knows from Russian history that hungry, returning soldiers can also bring down regimes. Fourth, Putin has created a war economy that benefits a large segment of the population and a variety of elites. Ending the war means transitioning from that kind of economy to a consumer economy and experiencing adjustment difficulties and a potentially large downturn. Finally, the war enables Putin to pretend that Russia is still a great power. Once the war ends, Russians and especially their elites will see that their brilliant leader has transformed their country into an appendage of China and North Korea. Well, it's been, appendage is kind of a harsh word, but it's been, as I said, to put it politely, the junior partner in the Sino-Russo relationship. So this is, I don't know how new this is. Inexpensive vacation packages to the Hermit Kingdom will be a small consolation for the loss of prestige. Moral of the story is obvious. It's obvious. If Trump truly wants a Nobel for bringing peace to Ukraine and Russia, he will have to address the primary root cause of the war, namely Putin. Anything else is a fake negotiation that can only produce a fake peace. Remember that I think it was the Chinese foreign minister, right, who is said to have told Europeans in private that China cannot afford for Russia to lose the Ukraine war. China cannot afford Russia to lose the Ukraine war. And we've also recently had a story about how, the results of the Ukraine war, depending on how it turns out, might result in the dissolution of the Russian Federation. To me, that's probably the most interesting. I don't know if interesting is really the right word, but yeah, we're living in interesting times, right? And I think in that context, the dissolution of the Russian Federation would certainly be interesting. And whenever you have something like that occur, the first question we need to ask is, who gets the nukes? Who gets the nukes? When the Soviet Union dissolved, Ukraine wound up with a lot of nukes. I don't know, ironically, or of course, they now wish that they had not given them away. But actually, yes, they said, Ukraine went to the West and say, hey, please take these things off of our hands. We don't want them. Those used to be Soviet nukes, but then Ukraine became independent, and the Soviet nukes became Ukrainian nukes. And then there was an international effort to transport those things out of Ukraine, or decommission them, I think is what happened to them, as I recall. So if the Russian Federation dissolves or breaks apart, then maybe something like that will have to take place. I don't know. But that would certainly be one thing. And of course, the other thing then is what happens to Siberia, right? Yeah, what happens to Siberia? China would very much like to have all those resources in Siberia. Yeah. Anyway, so this man has given us his opinion, 5 reasons why Putin will absolutely never, never, ever end his war in Ukraine. Well, obviously, it's not ever, 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 because his own lifespan is limited, and presumably, when his lifespan comes to an end, or whether it's that way or some other way, he exits the stage, so to speak. The next person to take command may have a different idea. They may say, "Hey, you know what? This is Putin's war. It's not my war. I don't want to deal with it, and so let's make a deal with something like that with the West." Who knows what will happen? But so then I think he kind of implies that, doesn't he? He says that the root cause of this war is Putin, and President Trump needs to deal with Putin. Right. We shall see what will happen. Yes, I believe Putin's going to be in Beijing next week. 1, 2, 3, next Wednesday, I believe. China is having a big parade, military parade, and they're inviting a lot of people, and Putin's expected to be there. Now, interestingly, China also invited Taiwan to be there at the parade. Kim Jong-un is going to be there, and I don't know who else is going to be there. But yeah, they invited Taiwan to be there. Let's take a look at this. Parade decision could have melted relations between China and Taiwan. Okay, well, could have, all right. China has made a significant decision regarding its V-Day military parade. Well, V-Day meaning, the official end of World War II. Most countries in Asia celebrate August 15th because that's the day that the Japanese emperor went on radio and said, okay, let's endure the unendurable, and let's stop fighting. And that's basically when people stopped, or Japanese soldiers stopped fighting, and in Korea, for example, it was a free-for-all. Japanese were scrambling to get off the peninsula before Koreans killed them, and the Koreans were running around shouting "Manse, Manse" and stuff like that. Anyway, China has made a significant decision regarding its V-Day military parade, which could greatly impact its relationship with Taiwan and the potential for broader global conflict. The event is set to take place in Beijing's Tiananmen Square next week, and it appears that invitations have already been distributed. This year's V-Day will commemorate the 80th anniversary of the conclusion of the Second Sino-Japanese War and Japan's surrender in World War II. These events resulted in the deaths of over 35 million Chinese civilians and soldiers. That might be a bit of an exaggeration by the Chinese Communist Party, I suspect. Anyway, but these numbers, I guess we'll find out. We can look it up when we get to Spirit World. But anyway, a lot of people did die. That's true. It also marks the 80 years since Taiwan transitioned from Japanese occupation to governance by the Republic of China. And that is not true. That is not true. Taiwan did not transition from Japanese occupation to government. Oh, well, I'm sorry. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Taiwan did come under the Republic of China in 1945. That's true. It's just that the government of the Republic of China did not cross the Strait to Taiwan until 4 years later. But I'm sorry, this guy's right. Okay. Taiwan became a part of, became territory of the Republic of China. The event not only provides an opportunity to reflect on what is arguably the most influential period in Asian history, but Xi Jinping will also utilize it to display China's military power. Amid escalating global tensions, the highly regarded Guam killer ballistic missile, reportedly capable of reaching the strategic American territory, is expected to be showcased in the capital. The relationship between China and Taiwan is fraught, with the island determined to maintain its independence despite China's territorial claims. Over recent years, numerous reports suggested that the People's Liberation Army is planning an attempted invasion, despite warnings from the US and its allies, reports the Express. Despite these tensions, China has extended an invitation to Taiwanese officials to attend the V-Day military parade on September 3. Zhu Fenglian, spokesperson for the State Council Taiwan Affairs Office. Now, this will be a CCP operation, all right? Because this is the State Council, for example. That's a People's Republic of China, in other words, Beijing, China organization. Taiwan Affairs Office. So this is the office within their government that deals with Taiwan and tries to figure out how to bring Taiwan into their fold. Addressed a press conference this week emphasizing that the upcoming event is a collective effort by all Chinese people, including those from Taiwan, who have made significant sacrifices and contributions to the war effort. Well, yeah, okay, let's first read this. She urged the individuals of both sides of the strait to remember history, honor their martyrs, promote the spirit of patriotism, and work together towards national reunification, thereby paving the way for a brighter future for national rejuvenation. The parade, expected to last 70 minutes, will be conducted in 2 phases: military review by President Xi Jinping, and a march past of troops in Tiananmen Square as detailed by a military officer. Troops participating in the parade will form up along Chang'an Avenue in Beijing, where they will be reviewed by Xi, who also serves as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China Central Committee and the chairman of the CMC, that would be the Central Military Commission. I don't know why they didn't spell that out. Central Military Commission, according to Wu Zik, Deputy Director of the Office of the Leading Group for the Military Parade, and a senior official of the Joint Staff Department of the Central Military Commission. They finally did it there. Okay. Wu revealed that a total of 45 formations and echelons will participate in the Grand Parade. He further explained that during the parade march past, airborne flag-guarding echelons, foot formations, battle flag formations, armament columns, and aerial echelons will sequentially pass through or fly over Tiananmen Square. In June, Wu announced that the parade will showcase new type combat capabilities and include an address by CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping. The event is anticipated to draw a significant contingent of foreign dignitaries, given its timing close to the 2025 Tianjin SCO Summit. They don't spell that out, but that stands for a Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is kind of supposed to be sort of China's attempt to counter the Western organizations like the G7 and so forth. All right, so if I were Taiwan, and I suspect they already have, if I were Taiwan, I would not accept this. Okay, basically, they're going to show Taiwan all the weapons that they're going to use when they invade, right? So I don't think this is a very good. They talk about patriotism, but they talk about, oh, let's work together for national reunification. But Taiwan is saying, hey, listen, especially the current president. He's saying, listen, we're independent already. We are an independent country. And so we're not trying to unify with you. And there's no reason for you to try to unify with us. You go your way, we go our way. And we are two countries. We may be ethnically the same, but we're two countries. And so it doesn't seem to, I will be surprised if Taiwan accepts this. In fact, I'd be very surprised and probably very disappointed as well if it turned out that they accepted this. But this author obviously is leaning towards PRC, towards communist China. He talks about how could greatly impact the potential for broader global conflict, as if this would lead towards peace, but it would be peace under Chinese domination. And that's exactly what Xi Jinping. Peace under him. He wants to be the emperor of the world. And so I think it's very foolish it would be very foolish for Taiwan to accept this invitation. Yeah. I know, let's see, a few years back, maybe it was 10 years back, the South Korean president attended this. Similar, when wasn't the 80th anniversary, it was the 75th, I guess, or the 70th, maybe it was the 75th. That was Park Geun-hye, the daughter of Park Chung-hee, who was president and then got impeached. They always get impeached, don't they? And at the time, the U.S. expressed its disappointment towards Park Geun-hye. The U.S. was not happy with what she did. And the current president is, kind of friendly towards China and wants to maintain friendly relations with China. And I have not heard whether he's going to attend this or not. Actually, we should check that. Background music, please. Will Lee Jae-myung attend the military parade in Beijing? Wait. I'm sure he's been invited. All right. Let's see here. This is a story that came out very recently anyway. Shortly after President Lee Jae-myung, I lost it. One. Shortly after President Lee Jae-myung reaffirmed the priority stance of the South Korean-U.S. alliance through the South Korea-U.S. summit, the situation in Northeast Asia began to fluctuate as China and North Korea began to restore relations. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will be on the watchtower of Tiananmen at the 80th anniversary of the victory of the anti-Japanese war in Beijing, China, on the 3rd of next month. In other words, Chinese President Xi Jinping provided a place for Chairman Kim, a reclusive leader, to make his debut on the multilateral diplomacy stage. Chairman Kim's attendance at the military parade is expected to instantly restore the strained relations between North Korea and China and inform the international community that North Korea is a member of the anti-American camp led by China and Russia. Well, is that news? In addition, it's expected to increase the burden on South Korea by strengthening the structure of confrontation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, China, Russia over the Korean Peninsula amid intensifying competition between the U.S. and China. Okay, so it sounds like Lee Jae-myung's not going, at least according to this article. And this is written in the Mail Business newspaper, which is kind of a, I don't know, I consider a second-tier economic newspaper in Korea, but others may disagree. And that story was written today. Today, the 28th? Yeah, that's okay. It was written, updated 1952. It's about an hour ago. All right. Okay, so it was. I thought it was already confirmed days ago that Kim Jong Un was going to be there, but I mean, of course he's going to be there, right? How would he miss that? Okay, but they say it was officially confirmed recently. All right, let's see here. Meanwhile, we have this. Increased China military activity around Taiwan. Just in case they might think that they've been forgotten. Taiwan's defense ministry says it spotted over 40 Chinese military aircraft and 7 naval vessels operating near Taiwan in the 24 hours leading up to Thursday morning. All right, that's all there is to that story. And the rest of it is this video. Okay. This is the Taiwan ADIZ. In other words, the what is that? The Defense Identification Zone. What does the A stand for? Can't remember. Anyway, so when someone enters this area, they're supposed to identify themselves to Taiwan. Yeah. Air defense, okay, air defense identification zone. Okay, that's what it stands for. Total Chinese military activity around Taiwan, aircraft 41, vessels 7, 24 out of 41 entered the air defense identification zone. Okay. So, it's another way that China keeps reminding Taiwan that they're going to get invaded at some point, according to China. And, I think there is a convincing argument that says that Xi Jinping has to invade at some point. I mean, he's made such a thing of this that if he eventually winds up not invading, then he becomes a big liar, right? But if he invades, what are the consequences? Of course, China will say, hey, this is an internal matter. It's nobody's business. But Xi Jinping will become a pariah in many parts of the world, not all parts of the world. Some countries that are dependent on China for various economic reasons will accept China's explanation, but certainly Europe, United States will come down pretty hard on China. And China, I suspect, may wait until President Trump is no longer in office. It may wait until then and decide to deal with perhaps a more predictable and I think right now people around the world are getting the message that President Trump is in no mood to be fooling around. During his first term, he really didn't understand the levers of power in Washington, but he figured it out. Yep, he figured it out. And he's using those levers of power to their maximum extent right now. Yeah. By the way, sort of related to that, this whole thing, of President Trump mentioning last Monday during the meeting with Lee Jae-myung in the Oval Office about South Korean police raiding churches. And President Trump initially seemed to kind of criticize that, saying that these are really terrible things going on. And what's going on there? Is this a revolution? Is this a purge? Or how can we do business there? And so then he did not, of course, President Trump did not specify which church, and so there was speculation about that. And then CNN came out with an article saying that it was actually the Unification Church. And the sort of the ripple effect of that is still, I think, reverberating, or is still, reverberating in South Korea. It turns out that when Lee Jae-myung's people were going to Washington, they were concerned that Lee Jae-myung might be walking into what they called a Zelensky moment. And I'm sure you know what that would mean, right? Where they're in the Oval Office there in front of the cameras and everything like that. And Lee Jae-myung might get humiliated by President Trump and perhaps by Vice President Vance, like Zelensky was humiliated. And they wanted to avoid that. They wanted to figure out how they could avoid that. And they were successful in doing that. But I think now, kind of analogous to that, is that maybe now they're worried about what you might call a Bolsonaro moment. By that, I mean, they look at how, first, Bolsonaro, of course, I'm referring to Jair Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, conservative president, and close relations with President Trump, who is now coming under a great deal of difficulty as a result of the lawfare brought by his successor, Lula, who is a very leftist, perhaps even communist president now. And President Trump has said, okay, if you're going to treat this conservative guy who's a good guy and I like him, if you're going to treat him that way, I'm going to increase your tariffs. And I think maybe, and this may, hear me out. It may be Lee Jae-myung's people around Lee Jae-myung are concerned that if South Korean prosecutors, special counsel, mishandle the situation with Hak Ja Han and also with the couple of other Christian churches that they're targeting, but especially with Hak Ja Han, that President Trump might increase the tariffs against South Korea. I know it sounds, from an American perspective, you might say, oh, what are you talking about? But from a Korean perspective, think about it. First of all, President Trump does not have an ambassador in Korea right now. Right now, there is no U.S. ambassador. The United States does not have an ambassador. The embassy is run by the Charge d'Affaires. And so there isn't the kind of high-level channel of communication that would normally exist. And the fact that President Trump said those words and apparently may have indirectly sort of put a shot across the bow of the South Koreans with respect to Hak Ja Han, that actually, from the South Korean perspective, is a pretty big thing. The fact that the Family Federation, or not the fact, but the appearance, or at least appearance, that the Family Federation had the channels and the influence to put those words in President Trump's mouth is pretty huge in South Korea. And even CNN came along and said, "Oh yeah, he was talking about Unification Church." That made it even so. CNN even kind of sealed the deal for the Family Federation. Family Federation sends them a bouquet of flowers or something, because the CNN really helped them out on that. And so, I've always been skeptical that South Korea is actually going to put a grandmother in her 80s who was pretty much legally blind, and absolutely legally blind, and take a person like that and put that person in jail. I've always been skeptical of that. But I think this makes that even less likely now that that's going to happen. It's even less likely, I think, that Hak Ja Han is actually going to go to jail. She may be indicted. In fact, I think the possibility of an indictment is considerable. But she can be indicted without being detained. And when she's indicted, she'll be tried. And then also, she will likely be found guilty. If I'm assuming that the allegations right now are that the prosecutor is going to be able to back up those allegations with enough evidence that she can be found guilty, indicted and found guilty. But even then, I think she'll be given a suspended sentence so that she will not actually serve jail time. So is that God's will or not? Did President Trump fulfill God's will, or did he uh, do the opposite by lessening the chances that Hak Ja Han may go to jail? I don't know. I don't know. I don't presume to know. But I know this whole thing with Hak Ja Han is incredibly heartbreaking for a true father. You know, and when I think about this, I'm reminded of the time that in Cheongpyeong, when father, and I've talked about this before, where father had a brother get up and sing the song Ulsan Arirang. And I tried to find the English words to those, or a translation of that song, but I couldn't. But it's a song. Arirang, of course, you know, is a folk song, but this is not really related to that, the Arirang that you know. Not at all related to it, as a matter of fact. But this is a song, it's kind of a ballad about a man who marries a woman who is not Korean. And I think given the circumstances, she's probably Japanese. But anyway, she's not Korean. That's the important part. And at some point, she goes away, promising to return. But she doesn't. And he's deeply in love with her. And he's waiting for her to return. And in the song, he says, you know, whose heart have you now connected with, or something like that. And as the brother was singing this song, I think some of you told me that you were there as well. As the brother was singing this song, father was crying like I've never seen him cry. In fact, I don't know if I've ever seen anyone cry like that before in public. There was 1,000 people there. And father's just, the tears are just pouring out of his eyes. And of course, at the time, you know, none of us knew what was going on behind the curtain in the private apartment of two parents. We only learned about that when the Second King started talking about it. And so, you know, we really couldn't understand why father was reacting to this song in such an incredibly emotional way. But now we understand. Now we understand that his heart was breaking because Hak Ja Han had left him, and he was waiting for her to come back, and she wasn't coming back. And he was asking, well, whose heart have you now connected with? So this whole situation with Hak Ja Han, including the current situation, is very heartbreaking. He's not out for revenge against her. I mean, there are consequences to her actions, and there's certainly a limitation to how much father can intervene on her behalf. There's certainly a limitation on that, because we all have our 5% portion responsibility. So do you think that he might thank President Trump for helping, or somehow helping to keep her out of jail, or to minimize her punishment at the hands of South Korean authorities? I'm not giving an answer. That's not a statement. That's a question. I don't know. I don't know at all. Perhaps we'll know when we get to split room. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, right now her legal status is that of suspect. She's not a material witness. Her status has been defined by the special counsel as not material suspect, but of suspect. not material witness, but of suspect. And also, the counsel is the special counsel is leaking pieces of information bit by bit by bit. And the piece of information that's being leaked today is that the special counsel has in their hands a message uh, from a high level, what they say, a high level Family Federation official, stating that Akchan gave uh, uh, money to a certain member of the legislature. And if true, this would be a pretty clear violation of law, of election law. So the special counsel is kind of trying to sort of prepare the way, I guess, by putting certain information into the media, prepare the way for them to bring her in. And think of it, when they served their search warrant on the palace in Chongpyeong in the Gapyeong there in Korea, about 100 young people gathered outside, and they were beating the ground, and so the special counsel, I'm sure, has to ask, what's going to happen when we bring her in? Are the Family Federation people going to be gathering outside of our office and wailing and beating the ground and so forth and so on, making a big commotion? Well, yes. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. So there are a number of reasons why they need to tread lightly. I mean, even when what's her name, McDevitt, Wonju McDevitt was brought in, there was a big crowd of reporters there and cameras, and basically she had to do the perp walk through those reporters. And what they do is they stick there's a reporter on each side of the perp, okay, the person being called in, and the person being called in. There's a reporter on each side, and they each have a phone, I guess, that is recording, and they stick those phones in the mouth, okay, or near the mouth, and they're firing questions at the person as fast as they can as the person is walking from the parking lot to the door of the office. And so it's a pretty embarrassing moment, and I'm sure it's one that Hak Ja Han would dearly like to avoid. But I don't know how that would be accomplished, because even the former president was treated in the same way. And so she will be treated in that way as well. But she's a suspect, so they have to bring her in at some point. And unless they somehow sneak her in, and I don't know why they would do that. I don't think they're in the mood for doing any favors for her. She's going to have to go through that sort of a gauntlet there as she goes into the office. That's how things are done here in this country. All right, let's see here. We got a couple minutes left. What can we look at here? Oh, yes, there was a shooting, wasn't there? And I guess it was a transgender person, according to Breitbart anyway. Trans shoots up Minneapolis Catholic school, evil, fired through church windows while students at mass. At least 2 children died in pews, 17 wounded. And AWR Hawkins has a story here, explains trans terror in Minnesota. I'm afraid we don't have time. I don't have time to go into this. You can look at it. Minneapolis mayor smears criticism of transgenderism. Right, okay. Slam for attacking prayers after Catholic school shooting. All right. Kash Patel shooting being investigated as a hate crime at targeting Catholics. Okay. All right. So Breitbart is obviously very upset about this. And okay. Right, yeah. Yeah, President Trump removed or is trying to remove a member of the Federal Reserve Board, and that's an interesting situation that's going on. And I think today, or at least, or was it yesterday, he actually had the U.S. Marshals go in there and uh, remove her. That's a pretty interesting thing happening. It's interesting to me that actually the markets are not reacting so much to that. Let's look at, let's see, it's, what is it, 8 a.m. on the East Coast. If we look at the index, yeah, so the index is actually up just slightly. Dow is up 94 points, Dow futures, that is. Uh, S&P up just 3.5 points. And so that basically the futures are, I guess you call it mixed or so. Okay, and Japan was actually up 240 points. Well, these are the futures also in Japan. Yeah. So it's people keep saying, oh, if the independence of the Fed is threatened, then the world financial system is going to fall apart. But I don't know, it doesn't seem to be happening. All right, that's it for today, Thursday. I will see you tomorrow. Trying to keep the days of the week straight in my mind right now. It's tomorrow. Yep, tomorrow's Friday. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.